Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
When you're struggling with your mental health, the world can seem pretty heavy, like no one understands what you're feeling or you're not sure how to ask for help. But here's the real truth. You're never in this alone. 988 Lifeline's trained crisis counselors are available 24/7 to offer the help and support you need to make it through. No judgment, no stigma, just someone to listen. Text or call 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, day or night. 988. Hope has a new number.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello and welcome across America. It is Eric Erickson here from Atlanta, Georgia, where we are safe. We are marked safe from the Democrats. They've announced they're going to Chicago. Apparently, they want to take their life into their hands and go to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. Thank goodness I have lived. And by the way, this is not a partisan point, and you should know this is not a partisan point. I feel the same way about the Republicans. I was delighted to wake up today to the news the Democrats have chosen Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. As someone who has to deal with Atlanta traffic on a regular basis, I did not want them coming. I do not want the Republicans coming. I do not want the Democrats coming. I don't want any of them coming. Our traffic is bad enough. It infuriated me when Obama would come through Atlanta and tie up traffic with his motorcades. It infuriated me when Trump would do it. It infuriates me when Biden and Kamala Harris do it. Our traffic is bad enough. I thank you, Democrats, for considering my city. Thank you, Republicans, for considering my city. But God have mercy on our souls. He has spared us an unmitigated week-long nightmare of protests, tear gas, and the like. Can you imagine if the Democrats had come to Atlanta and they got that police training facility and Antifa rioters out there, the combination of the two? It'd be far worse than if the Republicans came. And the Republicans, I guess, are going to Wisconsin. The Democrats are going to Chicago. I hope the Democrats are bringing their bulletproof vests to Chicago, given the crime up there. And the crime-ridden areas of the city just decided to support and elect a guy who's anti-police. So they can go live with the consequences of the voters' decisions in Chicago and spare us the traffic nightmares in Atlanta. God bless them. Thank you, President Biden and the Democratic National Committee, for passing over Atlanta. I appreciate it. It is our Passover moment. We have been spared. God bless you all. Thank you. I won't vote for you, but I do thank you. My goodness. The thought of that traffic, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. Okay. I don't want to start with guns. There's more to say about Louisville, Kentucky. Turns out the shooter was a progressive activist again. So we won't hear much more about him from the press. I actually want to start somewhere else. Doug Mastriano is the Republican who ran for governor in Pennsylvania. And he has decided that he is now going to run for the United States Senate. If you want a sense of Doug Mastriano's bid for the Senate, you can get a sense of his run for the governor's mansion. He was thoroughly rejected by the voters, and I doubt they're going to change now. It's amazing to me that he would do this. The outcome in Pennsylvania was 56.5% for Josh Shapiro, 41.7% for Doug Mastriano. Mastriano ran a terrible campaign. It was underfunded. He was a terrible fundraiser. He was a terrible campaigner. He did virtually every single possible thing wrong. And arguably, he dragged down Dr. Oz, who himself was not a very good candidate and lost, but he probably would have done better had Mastriano not been the gubernatorial ticket. It was 51-46 between Fetterman and Oz. Notice that gap there. There are about 3 to 4% of Republicans who refused to vote for Dr. Oz. He wasn't a good candidate, but he still outperformed Doug Mastriano. And so Doug Mastriano has decided he wants to run for the United States Senate. Kerry Lake and Blake Masters in Arizona are both weighing bids for the United States Senate in 2024. Kerry Lake still contends her race was stolen. You will note that Blake Masters is not out there screaming about a stolen election in Arizona. It is Kerry Lake who is screaming about the stolen election. And I tell you, every time I point out her election was not stolen from her, you get all sorts of belly aching from people over 60 who are emotionally invested in Kerry Lake. I do not understand it. I will not be disparaging. I will just say that there is a certain sort of retiree who believes everything Kerry Lake says, and I think it is because she was a newscaster, and they befriend these people on TV, and so when she says the election was stolen, they're convinced the election was stolen. Never mind that the Republicans in Arizona were able to keep the control of the state legislature. Never mind Republicans in Arizona actually outperformed the Democrats in the congressional races. Never mind that several other people got elected statewide who are Republicans. Every single one who focused on the stolen election stuff and was endorsed by Trump lost. All the other ones won. But for some people, it's easier to concoct a stolen election conspiracy theory than look at the pattern of who won and who lost and say, maybe it wasn't a stolen election. Maybe Arizona voters didn't like Trump and his candidates. Then there's Wisconsin, Kelly, what's his name, Kelly, who ran. He lost by 11 points last time. They put him up again. He lost by 11 points this time. Paul Begala and James Carville, y'all know them. They successfully ran Bill Clinton's race in 92. And it's been so long. I was a kid when it happened, but I'm a student of politics and history. And I can tell you what the deal was. In 1992, Democrats wanted Mario Cuomo of New York. Mario Cuomo was the knight in shining armor. George H.W. Bush had been elected in 1988, not as George W. Bush, but as a third term for Ronald Reagan. There were literally people in the country who had stickers that said Bush Reagan 92. So George Bush put Dan Quayle as his vice president, a senator from Indiana, who wasn't a strong vice president. But at the time, if you go back to press reports in 1988, a lot of it was, well, George H.W. Bush was a master and commander of Washington, was vice president to Ronald Reagan. He knows who to call if he's got questions. Doesn't need Dan Quayle. He just wanted to make sure he locked in Indiana. Well, George H.W. Bush runs for office and says, read my lips, no new taxes. Then he fights the Gulf War. It's the first major military victory of the United States at war since Vietnam. His popularity in public opinion polling, depending on which national poll you believe, was between 89 and 92%. The most popular president in American history since George Washington. And that's not actually an exaggeration. It's true. But then the economy turned. And George H.W. Bush broke his promise. And he raised taxes. The Democrats were trying to get Mario Cuomo to run against George H.W. Bush. And Cuomo looked at Bush's polling and said, there's no way I can beat him, so I'm not going to do it. So a guy named Paul Tsongas stood up from Massachusetts, and a guy named William Jefferson Clinton from Arkansas. And Clinton had Begala and Carville on his team. And Clinton saw what a lot of other people didn't see before people saw it, because Clinton, regardless of his flaws, of which there are many, Clinton was very connected to those blue-collar Democrats who became Trump voters. That's why Bill Clinton was telling Hillary, you need to go to Erie County, Pennsylvania, you need to go to Wisconsin, and her super progressive woke team for Brooklyn ignored him. They didn't care about those people. Clinton always has. Whether you like him or not, he's cared about those people. And Clinton did a campaign, and it was a very interesting campaign. Remember what it was? It's the economy, stupid. Clinton went around the country and did not attack George H.W. Bush directly. Their campaign strategy in 92 was very simple. George H.W. Bush has lived in Washington, D.C. so long. He's a true patriot and American, but he's lost touch with the lives of ordinary, everyday American citizens. And it worked. And he won. Paul Begala and James Carville went and worked for Clinton in the White House for a while. They were his top strategists, put them on the map, made them something. They then went on to be CNN commentators. Neither of them are there now. It's kind of a legacy shift for CNN to finally be rid of both of them and Donna Brazile, who I worked with at CNN and actually think quite highly of all three of them, even as we may disagree in politics. They're very nice people. And they wrote a book on running for office. Carville and Begala did. And there's a rule they write in their book that seems commonsensical, but it is so often forgotten in politics. And the rule is this: never say or do anything that will win you a primary but cost you a general election. Your goal is to win the general election, not to win the primary. And if you say or do anything to ensure you win the primary that costs you the general election, you've lost. A lot of candidates will take strident positions for the primary, and then they think they can walk away from them in the general. And if you got a good, competent team against you, it's very hard to do. They make you own what you did in the primary. There's a corollary, though, Republicans need to remember. Never nominate someone in the primary who's going to lose in the general. Now, if you have a candidate, like let me take Rich McCormick. Rich McCormick is a congressman from the metro Atlanta area. Rich McCormick ran in the 7th Congressional District in a bad year for the GOP in 2020 and barely lost in a race that had trended to the Democrats. So he moves over to the 6th District after redistricting in 2022, and I supported him. Well, he barely lost in a Democratic district in 2022, or in 2020. This Marine combat veteran who's also an emergency room doctor, who is a white guy who went to a historically black college medical school and became the president of the student body with one heck of a bio and resume. Wonderful human being. It was close when he lost in the Democratic district. Obviously, he was a fantastic fit for the Republican district, and he won. Had Rich McCormick lost by 11 points in the 7th Congressional District, I wouldn't have supported him in the 6th. Now, let's stretch this out. You've got Blake Masters loses worse than any Republican candidate in the country, and he's thinking of running for the Senate. Carrie Lake is just curb stomped by the Democrats when she herself told Republican voters who were John McCain supporters, we don't want your support. And so they didn't support her, and she wants to run in 2024. Doug Mastriano loses a blowout. I mean, Dr. Oz, who was not a good candidate. Dr. Oz outperforms lifelong Pennsylvanian Doug Mastriano. Friends, American conservatives, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If you keep putting up these candidates who got blown out of the water by the Democrats, who apparently think the election was stolen and somehow don't have a plan to have it not stolen this time. I mean, for God's sakes, look at Carrie Lake. You're arguing that she should be a nominee in 2024, that 2022 was stolen from her, and now Katie Hobbs, not Doug Ducey, is governor of Arizona. How do you think she's going to stop it from getting stolen this time? I would argue the same goes for Trump from 2018, 2020, 2022. Instead of winning, we're whining these days. You gotta find candidates who can win general elections. Winning primaries and then losing everything just helps the Democrats. At some point, Republicans got to get better at discernment for which candidates to pick. And I would submit, when you have a candidate who runs a race and is blown out of the water by double digits by the Democrats, that right there is a candidate you should never put up for office again. And if you do this in Pennsylvania, you're going to help the Democrats keep the United States Senate. If you do it in Arizona, you're going to help the Democrats keep the United States Senate. And if you do it nationally, you're going to help the Democrats keep the presidency. We can start over. And in fact, I would argue for all of those independent voters out there who are tired of Donald Trump, if the Republicans deal with it internally, settle it internally, and push him aside internally, it sends a signal to all of those independent voters, even if you endorse the second coming of Donald Trump, as the Democrats say Ron DeSantis is, or a Mike Pence, or a Nikki Haley, or any of these other candidates, the voters will say, hey, the Republicans finally get it. They've moved past that. I can vote for them, and there will be hell to pay for the Democrats. The Democrats spent so much time in 2022 trying to shape the field of who they would face, and it worked. And they won a lot of races they shouldn't have won because they went after these Republican candidates, and it made the Republicans say, oh, they scared of this guy. We better nominate him. And the Republicans fell into the trap. And now the Democrats are doing this and, oh, Donald Trump, he could win again. All the Democrats, we could be helping him. Please, Republicans, don't nominate Donald Trump. Please don't. We're scared of him. Don't take the bait. Don't fall into the trap. Find better candidates. Hi there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. I don't want to go into names. I don't want to use the name of the Louisville shooter. I'm old enough to remember when the press gave very limited coverage to mass shooters. But that started to change when Rolling Stone put that fanboy picture of the Boston bomber on their cover. And we've reached a point in this country where if a mass shooter is perceived to be on the right, you get multi-day coverage of outrage from the media about how the right is a terroristic breeding ground. And if of the left, they move on very quickly. If you will recall, the mass killer in Waukesha, Wisconsin, who drove his car into the middle of a parade, it was the car that killed people, not the mass murderer, who turned out to be a black political activist of some sort. The shooter in Nashville, Tennessee, was transgender. Turns out the shooter at that Colorado nightclub was non-binary. And now it turns out the shooter in Louisville, Kentucky, had pronouns in his Twitter bio, was an active supporter of Black Lives Matters, hated Donald Trump, and prior to shooting, put up something on Instagram about how that they've ignored the protests. Maybe they will hear this. And the speculation at this point seems to be of sorts that he was responding to some sort of gun control protest and figured if he shot more people up, maybe people would respond. You know, Rick Scott was the governor of Florida during the Parkland shooting tragedy. And he actually advanced more gun control legislation and supported some in Congress. And he's still being excoriated by the left for not doing what they want. He was willing to actually enact some gun control legislation, but not everything they wanted. And they're tearing him up. There's no grace on that side. There's no room for compromise, so you're not going to get a compromise. Greetings, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the country. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. Sadly, we now have to deal with that issue that I have put off. I want to play you some commentary real quick. This is from Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who beat Doug Mastriano by more than 11 points and is now considered by some to be a future presidential candidate of the left.
And we have to come together and stop making pitiful excuses for inaction and actually get something done. Stop saying that, oh, well, this one bill wouldn't have stopped this particular situation. We need to take a number of steps, from making sure we've got universal background checks. Hell, we should all agree, Joe, criminals shouldn't get their hands on guns. Why is that so damn hard to all come together around? We also have to address the underlying drivers of violence. We can't ignore mental health in this country anymore. We have to recognize that in some cases, poverty, a lack of educational opportunity, a lack of workforce opportunity, that also leads to people sometimes making these kinds of choices. Let's get our heads around the fact that it doesn't have to be this way. That's the test of this nation. Are we really going to accept that this is normal? That this is the way it's just going to be? Or are we going to actually use our strength to rise up and do something different and save our babies, save, as Andy said, these children of God that are perishing every day due to this senseless gun violence? It doesn't have to be this way.
That's Governor Shapiro. And this is Andrea Mitchell.
Fundamentally different from a handgun, and handguns can do a lot of damage. Let's put that out there. And so, there's no easy solution to this, but these assault rifles, these weapons of war, do make devastating impacts on the human body, as that Washington Post series showed us in such graphic detail. And that's why President Biden has a proposal to ban so-called assault-style weapons. The issue is there are 20 million or so in circulation right now. So even if you ban them today, you'd still be confronted with that proliferation and fetishization of these weapons.
Unless you did something like the buyback that they did in Australia.
Exactly, right.
Okay, I forget. Sorry, I didn't have the primary speaker there, but here's what we've got. One of the dangers of the American press these days is they operate in such an isolated and cloistered left-wing echo chamber that they oftentimes say so much that is not true and do not even realize it. And a large number of Americans actually do understand that know more about guns. It is absolutely true. A majority of Americans would prefer expanded background checks. Most Americans, I think, would even prefer a 3-day delay in the ability to pick up a gun that you've purchased. I've seen polling on that. But overall, though people say they support gun control, when you actually get into specifics, fewer and fewer Americans agree on all the specifics. Additionally, part of the problem here is that most shootings in this country are actually from handguns, not from what the left now calls assault rifles. And for example, in that clip with Andrea Mitchell talking about an Australia buyback program, we have a Second Amendment Australia doesn't have. There are a great deal of proposals put forward by the left that treat the Second Amendment as if it does not exist, and you can't do that. Perhaps expanded background checks are worth Congress considering. Perhaps waiting a day or two to get your gun is worth considering. Perhaps, but perhaps not as well. What we find more and more is that most gun violence in this country still doesn't come from mass shooters. It comes from criminals who unlawfully acquire guns that we're not going to ban. And many times it is progressive prosecutors who led those people out of prison where they commit more crimes. There was a woman recently killed in Washington, D.C. by a violent criminal who a Democrat-appointed judge had allowed out onto the streets. There was the man who shot up the subway in New York City because the prosecutors in New York let him out of jail, and they shouldn't have. Time and time again, it is Democrats' refusals to enforce existing laws that cause more shootings than mass shootings. But mass shootings get all the attention. And lately, the mass shootings of the day have been done with the AR-15. The AR-15 is, we are told, a military-style weapon. That is a talking point of the left. Referring to the AR as an assault rifle is a talking point of the left. It actually stands for Armalite. It was manufactured by Armalite. I believe Smith & Wesson bought Armalite. It was a civilian rifle. This is something that I wish you all would internalize because it's true. And to members of the media who wish to advance gun control, I wish you would do it too, because when you say things like the AR is a military assault rifle that civilians can buy, you immediately discredit yourself with a lot of people who then don't believe the rest of what you say. And part of the issue in advancing any sort of honest conversation about reforms in this country related to guns have to come with you, the members of the media, being honest about what you're talking about, and Democrats as well, getting off their standard poll-driven talking points from left-wing advocacy groups into actual honest conversations. The AR-15 is not an assault rifle 15, it's an Armalite 15. It is not a military-style weapon of war. It was actually a civilian gun. Armalite manufactured the AR for civilian use. It was only in the 1960s. It came out of the 50s, and it was in the 1960s that the military decided to base the M16 on the AR. The military gun came after the civilian gun. The reason the AR is so popular is twofold. One, the patents expired on its design, so any gun manufacturer in the nation can replicate it. And two, because it was banned in the temporary assault weapons ban of the 1990s, once that was undone, it came full force into fashion. A lot of Americans decided they were going to buy them up lest it be banned again, because they kind of understood intuitively that if they could go on and buy them, the Supreme Court was not then going to make people hand them back in. The White House idiot, Karine Jean-Pierre, said this in her press conference yesterday.
So we need Congress to act. And if you think about assault weapons ban, we know when the president was involved in 1994 to get that done, we saw gun violence go down. And when it sunset 10 years later, it went back up.
That's not true. In fact, this is a news analysis piece from the New York Times, the headline, "The Assault Weapon Myth." Over the past 2 decades, the majority of Americans in a country deeply divided over gun control have coalesced behind a simple proposition: the sale of assault weapons should be banned. That idea was one of the pillars of the Obama administration's plan to curb gun violence, and it remains popular with the public. 59% of likely voters favor a ban. But in the 10 years since the previous ban lapsed, even gun control advocates acknowledge a larger truth. The law that barred the sale of assault weapons from 1994 to 2004 made little difference. It turns out that big, scary military rifles don't kill the vast majority of the 11,000 Americans murdered with guns each year. Little handguns do. In 2012, only 322 people were murdered with any kind of rifle. The continuing focus on assault weapons stems from the media's obsessive focus on mass shootings, which disproportionately involve weapons like the AR-15. And then they get something wrong. They say a civilian version of the military M16 rifle, which suggests that it is derived from the M16 instead of the M16 being derived from the AR-15. Annually, 5,000 to 6,000 black men are murdered with guns. Black men amount to only 6% of the population. Yet of the 30 Americans on average shot to death each day, half are black males. It was much the same in the early 1990s when Democrats created and then banned a category of guns they called assault weapons. America was then suffering from a spike in gun crime, and it seemed like a problem threatening everyone. Gun murders every year had climbed 11,000, then 13,000, then 17,000. Democrats decided to push for a ban of what seemed like the most dangerous guns in America, assault weapons, as they called them, which were presented by the media as the guns of choice for drug dealers and criminals, and which many in law enforcement wanted off the streets. The politically defined category of guns, a selection of rifles, shotguns, and handguns with military-style features, only figured in 2% of gun crimes nationwide. Handguns were used in more than 80% of gun murders each year, but gun control advocates had failed to interest enough of the public in a handgun ban. Handguns remain more likely to kill you, and there is no proposal put forward by anyone to ban them. Y'all, can we just be exceedingly honest here? Normal, sane people don't go commit mass murder. And when you pull those mass murders out, you are left in large part with that thing the media wishes not to talk about and which I am not supposed to talk about. The reason I am not supposed to talk about it is because I am not black. And the media has decided it is racism to tell the God's honest truth. The majority of gun crimes in this country are committed by young black men against other young black men and women in this country. And the media doesn't want to tell you that. The Democrats don't want to talk about it. And they try to shame and vilify anyone who points it out as racist. If you want to solve gun problems in this country, if you want to solve mass shootings in this country, if you want to solve crime problems and gun violence in this country, you've got to address gangs. You've got to address young black men shooting other young black men and women. About half of gun deaths every day in this country are black on black violence. When you add in that's black men on black men violence, you add in black women and it goes above half. You add in non-white community generally and it goes up even higher. There's a fundamental brokenness in a lot of communities in this country. Dads are not around, many people in jail, poverty, crime. The left has decided to scream about systemic racism as opposed to actually addressing the problems and the fallout of the Great Society program in the 1960s, people walking away from church, people absolutely walking away from any sort of morality, people deciding that they're going to go to essentially the law of the street being whoever has the most guns win. And many of us can escape that reality based on where we live. You know the zip codes in your community in which not to go. And you know, for a while there was a feature in some cars in their GPS systems, they would try to bypass you through crime-ridden neighborhoods, and the left screamed, that's racism. You're bypassing certain non-white communities. No, you're bypassing communities with disproportionately high amounts of violence that no sane person should drive through. Your GPS system shouldn't get you carjacked or murdered, but they screamed racism instead. It's really hard to have honest conversations in this country about gun violence when anything you bring up about the actual data gets you labeled a racist in this country by progressive activists who don't want to acknowledge the failures of their policies over the last 40, 50 years. We are living in a dystopian society filled with people who kill other people with guns, not because we have so many guns, but because we have so many progressives who thought they were helping people and actually collapsed families and destroyed neighborhoods, and now instead can't grasp that their policies did that and demand instead we blame the gun as opposed to the person who pulled the trigger. That's the painful, sad truth. Now, I got to transition from there to the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and I'm pretty good at transitions these days, and not this one, but nonetheless. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm is an air purifier, and it's filterless. So it uses electrostatic plates, so you can wipe it out on occasion. You don't have to get a filter subscription. But where it shines in the way I use it is it's an odor eliminator. So, for example, real world example for me, my car broke, and I had to get a rental car for the next few days, and someone has smoked in the rental car, and that's not a problem because I fired up the Eden Pure Thunderstorm and ran it for about 15 minutes in the car, and it got rid of the stinky odors. It gets rid of litter box odors, smoke odors, pet odors, cooking odors, you name it, and it just works. It does. It generates ozone, and the ionized air wipes out those particles that generate the smell. Works well. You can get 3 of them for less than $200. For your upstairs, your downstairs, your basement, your RV, wherever you need them, get 3 of them, less than $200. You're saving $200. You get free shipping. EdenPureDeals.com is the website. EdenPureDeals.com. On the front page, you'll see discount code box. You put in my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. You'll get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms shipped to your house free of charge, free shipping of charge, and then you get them for less than $200. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is Eric. Hello, welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. Don't forget, if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can subscribe to the daily email. You can get the podcast, the live stream, all the social media links. Sign up for the email, please. A word, if you will. I have a 2021 Yukon Denali, and I have just had multiple problems with it, and apparently I'm not alone. I love the vehicle, but it's had some issues. I had to have the engine replaced and the transmission replaced, all under warranty. Somehow got metal fillings in the engine. They think it actually came from the engine. They don't know. The latest is I drove back from the Masters on Saturday night, went to the grocery store after I got home, and on my way out of the grocery store, the steering column electrical system malfunctioned, locked the steering column. I had to have it towed yesterday, and they haven't even called me yet to tell me what all will be involved. And then the engine that I got replaced is already acting up again. It's just problematic. I love my Denali, though. I love the size of it. I love the amount I can hold in it. I love the comfort of the ride. And I love it even more whenever I have to do a rental car, like they put me in a Dodge Journey, which is just, if you need one, God bless you. But gosh, the computer controls and stuff, it doesn't have CarPlay. I love using CarPlay from Apple. Plug in my phone, and suddenly I've got text messaging, my phone, all my music and stuff there. This thing, every time I turn on the car, I got to reconnect my phone to it. It won't automatically reconnect. It's just a garbage car. That gets me to General Motors, which has announced that in the future it's getting rid of CarPlay and Android Play. For those of you who don't know, if you have an iPhone or an Android device and you have a more modern car, you can plug it up with a USB cord or wireless, in my case, with my phone, and suddenly your display is taken over by Apple or Google's design, and you get your music and you get your voice messages, you get your navigation system from your phone, you get your phone, you get your calendar. Not all apps are there because obviously they don't want you to read an email while you're driving down the road. But GM has decided it is going to get rid of support for Android and Apple, instead using an in-house system by which they're already saying they then want to put in a subscription service for you to subscribe to things. This may be the last GM I get. If I'm giving up CarPlay in my car because GM wants me to buy a subscription package, I'm finding a car dealer that won't do that. Talk about customer unfriendly. It's a stupid idea. Now, they're going to apply it only to electric cars first, not to internal combustion engine cars. So maybe I can go a little bit further with them, but I may be not long for the GM world if they're getting rid of support for CarPlay. What is it with some of these manufacturers who they do not actually care about their customer, the quality of the vehicle, or anything else? They just want us as subscribers to some crap service. No, thank you.